All right. Welcome. This is going to be buckle up. It's going to be a long one. Might even be a bumpy one. But I thought it was time that I really distinguish this idea of being an evolutionary gentleman and what that means. So what's going to happen in this call is I'm going to talk a lot about what I think those distinctions are, why they're important, and we're going to talk about things like toxic masculinity and stages of masculinity and this idea of the alpha male and all those things. So there's going to be a few things that I'll talk about. Some of them is going to be changing the way we perceive these things, but a lot of it is going to be giving people a path so they can actually evolve themselves. Because as Philippe Lewis recently said, the thing that's unique about, for instance, Chris Orozco and I, is we distinguish the thing, but we also tell people how to evolve to that. There's a process that's involved there. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about me because there's a lot of new friends recently, and just make sure you have a sense of my path. I've been engaged in this business for full time for 16 years now. I've had over 500 one-on-one clients, but through 6-month programs. But it really, it did not start there. My path began, 30 years ago now, when I was in prison for my third felony right before the 3 strikes law happened in California. And what that means is instead of doing 25 years to life, I did 3. I was very fortunate. And I was in for stealing brand new sports cars off car lots. It was my form of entertainment at the time. And I was very fortunate to go to prison at that time. Somebody doing life handed me a book called Awaken the Giant Within. And I really went to work on myself because I knew I didn't want to come back. I'd never been in there. I got out. I got certified as a practitioner and a master practitioner, and in NLP, back when that used to mean something, when they used to be 6 or 8 month trainings. And by the way, at the end of this call, I'll be mentioning my own final NLP training that I'll be offering, and tell you how you can get a huge 50% discount on that. But so I tried to hang my coaching blanket out at 25, but I was 25. Nobody should hire a coach at 25, even if he had the life that I had and had the skills that I had. So I looked around at what was making money at the time, and it was Silicon Valley. And I got into the tech boom, the first tech boom. When Amazon, they weren't sure if it was going to make it work. In fact, Jeff Bezos was given 6 quarters to make it work. Otherwise, the VCs were going to pull their money out. And at one point, I was, billing $1,400,000 an hour, $14,000 an hour for the company I was working for. I was in direct IT staffing, so Oracle database administrators, Solaris system administrators, Unix, Java developers, things like that. And I met this beautiful woman, Isabel, got engaged. And shortly after we got engaged, I tested positive for HIV. That was 20 years ago. We got married anyway. And I started looking at the business I was in and decided to model the same business and negotiated my way out of the company, getting to keep all of my clients while also having them handle my back office for me. Virtually unheard of in the tech business, certainly in the staffing world. And just a few months later, I think 3 or 4 months later, 9/11 occurred. Twin Towers fell. And I started liquidating. I started doing things you're never supposed to do in business, which is, liquidate your own money to pay people, things of that nature. And we moved down to, Isabel and I got married. We moved down to San Diego because it was the one county adding jobs at the time in the short recession after 9/11. And I realized very quickly, and these are all lessons I've learned along the way, of course, learned very quickly that I didn't have the partner I thought. We've been married for 3 years, but we got married very quickly. I did not ask the questions I should have asked. Right? So a lot of the things that we'll talk about today, we're going to hit a bunch of topics: toxic masculinity, boundaries, victimhood, and responsibility, a whole wide range of things in the context of getting this evolutionary gentleman concept out there. This pillar of iron and light that I hope men are building. It's not one or the other. So I left. She wouldn't see a third party, couldn't have any agreements around communication, and I felt like I was dying in the marriage spiritually. I was still madly in love with her. Recently, somebody asked, have you ever left somebody when you're madly in love with them? Yes, twice. This was the first one. And because of my past, when I left her, I took, some money out of a mutual bank account. It was a corporate account that we had for tax purposes. And took her about a week, very smart woman, took her about a week to say, that's technically felony embezzlement, which never occurred to me because, it was my money. And it wasn't, it was a shell corp. So I asked a couple of lawyers if she could do this. And they said, yeah. Well, one of them said, you didn't marry her because she was stupid. I said, yes, thank you. The other one said, well, it's difficult. It's a marriage corporation. But it's super tricky. And here's the thing. It's a small town in San Diego, and you might make that DA's career. So it took me about 24 hours to decide, and I signed over everything. We had 2 houses at the time, a couple $100,000 in mutual funds, which my financial advisor, who had a crush on her, signed over into her name, not our name. So there I was, after being worth, over $1 million easily on paper, homeless, living out of my car, going, what the fuck just happened to me? And what would have it all make sense? Along the way, I forget to mention my father committed suicide when I was 23, but I had already completed my relationship with him. I'll just tell you a few quick stories about what my male role model was. My father, who was, people were universally relieved when he killed himself. And there wasn't a single person. He was considered a monster in most areas. And I hadn't seen him since I think that 18 was the last time I saw him. And he committed suicide when I was 23, but I had already completed my relationship with him. But let me just give you, I don't usually talk about my childhood, but I'm going to give you 4, sort of pieces so that you can see. He was a black belt in hung guard tiger crane. So when people talk about getting, beat by their father, very few of them have been, beat around the house by a black belt in a Southern Chinese system. It's very, let's say, exhilarating. He accused me of trying to kill him because I didn't drain the meat enough for dinner before I put in the hamburger helper, because we were in upper lower class. I don't know. We were always struggling for money. We were poor. He used to fix cars sort of for some used car lots. He would work on them. They'd be their sort of freelance mechanic. And he made me do push-ups in the rocks until my hands bled when I was too tired at midnight one night. I think I was 12. And so first of all, it's really challenging for me to, when you think of that whole life story, the stuff with my childhood. My mother left him when I was 6, took me and my sister with her. It took him about a year, and he kidnapped us back and then divorced her. So a very interesting childhood. Taught me to shoplift when I was 8. It was a little Oliver Twist. So there's a lot of things that you just go, oh my gosh. But there's some things that I'm grateful for that he did. But when, I never had a great male role model. And there's this idea for me, I think it's, men need to self-parent themselves at some point. And I'll never forget the best advice that my stepfather gave me. He rolled a suitcase into my room when I was like 17 and a half. And he says, Jason, you're about to turn 18. Nobody's going to give a shit what your father did to you. And he was right. And then all the other things, the divorce, the father's suicide, the HIV, make a bunch of money, lose a bunch of money. And so one of the first challenges I had in this business was actually having compassion for people who were complaining about certain aspects of their lives. But the thing that always had me orient correctly are a few mindsets. And, like even with HIV, my mindset was there must be something good here. There must be some reason that I got. There must be a benefit to it. And the way I transformed my numbers before, I was not medicated for 15 years. I never got sick. One of the ways I oriented myself was there must be some positive purpose for this, and did some inner work on the part of me that chose to get it. And that was the first step to resolving it. What do I mention in all of that? It's a massive responsibility orientation. After my ex-wife did what she did, I didn't go into hating women. What I went to was, I didn't ask enough questions before we got married. I didn't realize what her values were. I didn't, I will date longer next time, or there's all these. And so this general orientation to responsibility, wherever you're at in your evolutionary path, you cannot evolve any further until you have a general responsibility orientation. What that means is, no matter what's happening, it's not them. Recently I've had some hiccups with people I thought I was going to go into business with. I simply didn't do enough research first. It's not that there's, they're being them. There's nothing wrong with that. And so for me, the powerful place to stand is there. Until we start there, can't do anything. But really what this talk is about is all this, these terms flying around. And so first, I want to get us out of this idea that there's toxic masculinity or healthy masculinity. And really, I'm going to say that there's stages of masculine, and I'm going to map them across to basic stages of ego development. So what we usually think of as toxic masculinity is really pre-rational masculinity. And there's a lot of it out there. In fact, probably most masculinity is at that stage. There's also pre-rational feminine. These are I'm not going to get into too much of that, but there's plenty of ugliness out there on both sides. So let's not, everything that's wrong with the world isn't toxic masculinity. It's toxic humans. But I don't like the phrase toxic because it doesn't know for an evolutionary path. And so I think first we just need to get away from labeling it like this. But then the other thing I want to address is this idea that there's divine masculine or high masculine, or maybe there's different labels that we can lazily slap onto it. Somebody wants to distinguish themselves from the marketplace, which I am also going to do with this, evolutionary gentleman idea. But for me, it's about being able to integrate all the things. It's being able to heal your past, whether it's your stuff with, if you're still complaining about women and you're dating women, you should take a year off and heal yourself from your divorce, or from your ex-girlfriend, or from the beliefs that were laid into you by your whatever, unhealthy environment you were in. Whether that's I'm very fortunate. I didn't go to college. I went to prison instead. So I wasn't around the bro culture and I consider myself lucky in that sense. Very fortunate I wasn't exposed to that kind of thing. But the evolutionary gentleman, I've mapped it out a few ways on Facebook here, and I want to make sure I'm very clear. It's somebody who's healed their past around women. It's somebody who doesn't consider other men a threat or are in competition with other men. They don't shy away from competition, but it's not, they're uplifting each other. They're not sort of, trying to claim it's divine. I want to do a quick thing on this. I'm going to do a quick sidetrack on the idea of the divine masculine. Every time I've talked to a woman who said, "Oh, I finally encountered the divine masculine," and I can see their radiance, I usually go, "He knows how to hit your spots, doesn't he?" In other words, they're getting fucked really well by a conscious guy. To me, that's not divine. That's just how it ought to be, right? It's not. There's nothing spiritual about it. There's nothing surprising about that. There's nothing shocking or groundbreaking about that. So this whole, nobody knows what any of them mean anyway. There are things that labels that people put on to experiences they have that are positive, and I think that's great. I also think it's pretty sloppy. So this idea of stages of masculinity, and the idea that a man who's going to be an evolutionary gentleman, he really will be a gentleman. He really will open doors. He really will, shower rose petals on her on the bath. He'll offer his arm when they're out, or offer his coat when she's cold. The basic fundamentals of just being a gentleman. Opening her door and closing it, by the way, if she's getting into a car. Just do both the things. Finish the move. So there's all that. He's also integrate like this. I love the idea of shadow and the way people relate to it, because there is shadow work that I think is very valuable. And the problem is most people relate to it as something that's other than themselves. It's part of you. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can have pre-rational drives that some people consider dark, or powerful. It depends on their perspective, right? But an evolutionary gentleman doesn't deny it's part of him. He integrates it. He pulls it into his core, pulls it into his core of iron and light. So these stages, as we move up or deeper, if you prefer, it's a different metaphor for the same thing, are critical as we move through the world and in our relationship with women and with ourselves and with purpose, all those things. There's more and more high quality men out there, men of substance, men of purpose, men of clarity, men of principle. And they're not afraid of other perspectives. They consider them. They may not incorporate them. They may end up deciding it's not going to be a fit. But there's also this idea, I've seen a lot of people marketing their shadow lately. And I'm gonna say I see more of this with women than I do with men. I think it's because it's okay. They're like, well, I'm collie or whatever they do. Basically, they get a pass on all this what I would consider toxic behavior. Behavior I simply won't be around. Like I just choose to depart. I will extricate myself from the situation. An evolutionary gentleman doesn't have to put up with that stuff. It's not part of us. Now she can have all the feelings she wants to feel when she goes into blame and victimhood, or when she's using those tactics to manipulate lies and choose to extricate yourself from the situation. You can maintain healthy boundaries. You don't have to take any of this stuff. And I'm really tired of this idea that an evolved man or an evolutionary guy or a divine masculine is supposed to tolerate anything from a woman. I just think it's false on its face. And I think it's been misused and abused. And I don't engage in those things. So these are some of the initial ideas, initial structures I'm laying out for the evolutionary gentleman. I've been an NLP trainer for years. So I am offering my final NLP training in May, mostly because I promised a VIP client I would do one more. And there's 7 people in it currently. If you message me having watched this and used the word periwinkle, which is a color, I'll give you half off the thing. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad it's opening up. I expected to have Lady Lyons with me today. She's not available for logistical reasons, and we won't be doing a stream. Chris Orozco got sick, but I look forward to, and we were supposed to do one yesterday. I look forward to more of these conversations where there's more of a dialogue. But I just wanted to say hello, and I'll be distinguishing this whole idea of the evolutionary gentleman very soon. So if you're interested in talking to me about the NLP training, let me know. Just drop a message in Messenger and mention the word periwinkle, and we'll have a conversation about whether it's a fit for you or not, and give you that discount. Feel free to ask me any questions you have at any time, privately or otherwise. I'm always open to people challenging the things that I say, because I have it. It just makes my work even better. Have a great Friday.